Hey everyone. So this week I want to talk a little bit about hydration because it is heating up here in the Pacific Northwest. We had 80 degree weather this last weekend, and we're definitely heading into these summer months. So around the country, it's going to be warming up. And hydration is so critical in terms of athletic performance. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this today, why hydration is important for you as an athlete, what it means in terms of hydration, how we keep hydrated. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of signs and symptoms and how to monitor your hydration levels, and then some tips and tricks moving forward of how you can keep hydrated and monitor that as well. All right. So why hydration is so super important for athletes, and not only athletes, but everyone, because if we are moving around dehydrated, we increase the risk of heat-related illness. And we really, really want to be careful of that, especially as athletes, because it can happen so quickly on the field or during a race, whatever it might be. Really, really important that we're keeping hydrated, because by keeping hydrated, our body is able to better regulate our body temperature. It's going to have the hydration to keep our joints lubricated, which is going to help prevent injury. It's also really critical. Hydration is important for delivering and transporting nutrients throughout the body, especially thinking about blood. Oxygen is delivered through our blood, and that's really important from a muscle recovery perspective, along with our other nutrients, right? Like our protein, our carbohydrates, our micronutrients, our vitamins and minerals are all being transported through that bloodstream. And so it's really important that we're keeping hydrated so that when our blood is being pumped through our body, that we're moving those nutrients to help in terms of that recovery process. Also, if we just don't have as much blood volume, if we're dehydrated, our heart is going to be working a lot harder to pump the blood that we do have. So what might be some signs of dehydration? Signs of dehydration could be dizziness, fatigue, muscle cramping. I see this one a lot with athletes. Usually it's one where athletes are reaching out because they're like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. Bethany, I feel like it's my hydration. It's not always hydration. Sometimes it's a fueling piece. So we can dive into that more together as we look into those individual barriers, but it could certainly be a hydration piece. And when we think about hydration, it's not just the liquid that we're consuming, it's also the electrolytes that are really important. So when we're sweating, we know that we're not just losing liquid, we're not just losing water, we're also losing sodium, potassium, and calcium, those other electrolytes that are really critical in order for maintaining hydration. And sodium is in the biggest volume of the electrolytes that we lose. So if you're a really salty sweater, you might notice that after a really intense training session, you almost have like a white powder buildup on your skin. That's a really good indicator that you're a salty sweater and that you probably need a little bit more in terms of electrolytes to help with that replacement, not just a standard electrolyte drink. It might need to be a little bit more hefty in terms of the amount of electrolytes that drink and beverage is giving you. So in terms of strategies for recognizing hydration, I talk about this one a lot with athletes. An easy way to monitor our hydration status is looking at our urine color regularly. So where are we falling on this scale? And this chart on the right is a really good indicator of where we're falling. Are we dehydrated? Are we adequately hydrated? How extreme is that dehydration? So I always encourage athletes consistently, what's the color of your urine? How are you feeling? Especially if they're experiencing muscle cramps. But again, it's not just the liquids that are important, it's also those electrolytes. So if they're experiencing muscle cramps and they're just drinking a ton of water, it's probably because they're not getting enough electrolytes. It could be other factors as well, but we have to look at all of those different components to really identify what's going on. Another thing that I'll often recommend to athletes is weighing yourself before training and post training and see how much body weight you're losing, that's going to be directly related to your hydration status. Now, there's other things that can factor in that if you're having a snack or those types of things. If you're going to the bathroom, you might be impacting that input and output. But the big rule of thumb is we want to make sure that we're not losing more than 2% of our body weight when we're exercising, because research shows that has a significant impact on our performance. So we can monitor that. We can monitor the color of our urine, both really helpful, effective strategies. And I do help athletes in determining their own sweat rate because every athlete is different. And there's not a standard, there's generalized recommendations in terms of keeping hydrated, but it's really important to know what your sweat rate is and how heavy of a sweater you are. If you're a salty sweater, making sure that you know that so that you're getting the adequate electrolytes to help with that hydration piece. Okay. So thinking in terms of strategies to help with hydration, one big one that I'm always talking to athletes about is carrying a water bottle with you everywhere you go, right? Especially if you're an athlete getting on a plane to go to competition. It can be very dehydrating when we're traveling. We're just not in our consistent routine. We're moving a lot of equipment and things like that. We're just not as consistent. And so it's really important to always bring our water bottle with us wherever we go, sipping on fluids frequently throughout the day. If we're drinking a lot of fluid at once, and athletes used to do this when I worked in the university setting and we did urine testing for hydration status. They would drink a ton of water right before we would do urine specific gravity testing. And what happens is your body just flushes it out pretty quickly. When you drink a big bolus of water, it's like you have to go to the bathroom pretty quickly. And so they would typically pass that hydration test, but it was not a very accurate result. It didn't necessarily mean that they were actually adequately hydrated. So really important to be drinking frequently throughout the day. There's also some really awesome apps. If you're not in a good rhythm and routine with drinking fluid, there's some apps that will like ping you and let you know, don't forget, or you can track your hydration to make sure that you're getting enough. A good rule of thumb is making sure that you're getting at least half your body weight in fluid ounces a day. But then we want to make sure that we're adding fluids in addition to what we're losing during training. So that's a general recommendation of half your body weight in fluid ounces a day to keep hydrated at baseline. But then we want to add in fluid in addition to what we're doing during competition, during training, things like that to make sure that we're replenishing. Typically, if we're losing a pound of body weight during training, we're going to want to replenish with at least 16 to 24 ounces of water to make sure that we're keeping hydrated. So that's a really important part of that recovery process. Monitoring our urine, which we talked about, is really important in monitoring that hydration status. Making sure that you're not just looking for thirst as an indicator to drink, because often by the time we're feeling and noticing thirst, we're probably on the side of a little bit more dehydrated. So we want to just be in a consistent routine with drinking fluids throughout the day and not rely on that thirst mechanism, because sometimes when we're training, it just might not be there. And one thing when we're adding in electrolyte-based drinks that contain sodium, sometimes that can be really helpful in encouraging us to drink more, because we know when we eat something salty, it actually kind of stimulates that thirst factor. So if you didn't do electrolytes during training, you didn't realize how intense the training was going to be, close out and do your recovery snack with something that has some salt in it so that it helps encourage that electrolyte repletion, also makes you thirsty to make sure that you're getting those fluids to rehydrate. All right. So don't forget, hydration is so critical for you as an athlete. Here we are heading into these summer months. So I hope this will be helpful in keeping you hydrated heading into the summer. All right.